I'm going to call City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals to order for December 21st, 2017. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here. Minutes to be approved November 16th, 2017.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Minutes are approved. Any reports, resolutions, and communications?
Just a couple quick items. First, I apologize for the issues with the door tonight. We'll be periodically checking to make sure no one is left standing outside waiting for entry, and hopefully that'll be fixed here in the next few minutes. Again, our apologies. Another note is until board member Throckmorton arrives, we have a bare minimum quorum of 3 people, so it will take a unanimous vote of the board for any action. And then finally, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out here in the middle of the holidays, and thank you for your time serving on the board this year, and hopefully we'll see all of you next year.
And next time, you don't have to open the doors. First case is UVV-30-17. Staff report, please.
Hi, Amelia Lewis presenting the staff report. The subject site is located at 722 West 2nd Street, immediately adjacent to the Building Trades Park. The property is zoned medical and is located at the edge of the Prospect Hill Local Historic District. Currently on the property is an approximate 1,400 square foot single-story detached structure that has been converted to a barber beauty shop. This use was established prior to the existing UDO, making it a legally non-conforming use. Surrounding uses to the property right now include single-family residential to the north, medical to the south, and the Building Trades Park to the east. Here is the site today. So the petitioners are proposing to demolish the existing structure and construct a 3-story mixed-use structure. The existing barber beauty shop would be relocated to the first floor of the new building. The second floor would be an owner-occupied unit, and the third floor would be 1 2-bedroom unit and one one-bedroom unit. As the structure is located in the historic district, it was required to receive a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Preservation Commission, which it did. So this petition has a use variance involved for the barber beauty shop in the medical district, as well as a variance from the architectural requirements regarding the roof eaves. Just a quick overview of the site. Right over on the left side of the screen is 2nd Street. Right along here is 2nd Street. This is an existing alleyway. There would be pavers in between the sidewalk and the building. Main entrance to the building would be along the east side. There are 8 parking spaces proposed, 6 on this side of the building and 2 in the garage for the owner-occupied unit. The site plan meets density, height, and parking and all other UDO features besides the 2 variances. Looking at the building, this is the east elevation, which would be immediately adjacent to the park and one of the more visible facades. The proposed materials include a smooth white stucco and wood planks with a walnut stain, and the roof is architectural asphalt shingles. So focusing on the architecture variance, roof eaves are required to hang over the roof by 2 feet, which is more traditional in design. As you saw, the building is fairly modern in design, and the petitioner has chosen not to put eaves on the building. Staff could not find any injury to the public or undue adverse effects from this. It's primarily a result of conflicting standards between the UDO and the Historic District Architectural Guidelines. However, the design was approved by the Historic Preservation Commission, so any changes would have to receive a new COA. Looking into the use variance, the medical district prohibits most commercial uses, including barber, beauty shop. We could not find any adverse impacts to the neighbors, no injury to the public. The site is currently being used with the same use, just going into a new building. Also, since it is zoned medical and the eventual move of the hospital, the area is likely to change substantially. The GPP designates this property as public, semi-public, institutional. The GPP notes that this land use is designed to provide support to the hospital, and with the anticipated land use change, this request does not substantially interfere with the general and specific policies of the GPP for this area. The department recommends that the board adopt the findings and approve the petition, given that the proposed variance from architectural standards is appropriate for the design of the building, and the proposed use variance would reestablish an existing commercial use in a neighborhood with no negative effects. There are 3 conditions, as you can see, and otherwise, that is it. Thanks.
Petitioner's representative? So if you go to the podium, please. And can you please state your name?
Yes, I'm Mike Shively. I'm the architect for the project.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. You have up to 20 minutes to present the petition.
Really not much to present. We've had a great experience with Amelia and the Historic Preservation Committee so far, going through the certificate of appropriateness. We did that in 2 phases. The first phase, we came and heard a lot of neighbor feedback on the property. It's a little bit of an unusual site in that it is in a very sensitive, neighborhood sort of district, but it's on a commercial street and is a mixed-use property. So we're very sensitive to listening to the neighbors' concerns, and in keeping with the residential structures around it. We lowered the height of the building by about 5 feet from our original submittal to be in more keeping with the existing ridge heights throughout the neighborhood. And we're happy to get a unanimous positive approval on our second review. Do you have any additional questions for me?
Thank you. We will come to that section of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff and/or petitioner by board? You may just want to have a seat there in case there's any questions. Barry?
Yes, for the petitioner, please. The south elevation, which faces Second Street, there is a door there, but it does not look very prominent in the elevation. Being that that faces the major street, do you have any other architectural features or lighting, canopy, signage that will help accentuate that?
Yes. I don't know if we can get it up on the screen, that particular elevation, but we did get that feedback from the first time before the Historic Preservation Committee, and we did make that entry much more prominent. So it's about a 48-inch wide glass door that you can see there on the first floor, and we aligned directly above it a similarly scaled window to really bring that for the full height of the facade.
Okay. There'll be some signage, I would imagine?
Correct, to the extent that we also don't want to be confusing in that the actual entrance to the salon will be on the side adjacent to the parking. But this would be a door that would allow, salon access out to that paver area in front of the building. The particulars of the site, though, however, are that the parking is on the side of the building,
Sure.
which is why we're using that as our principal entry.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Joe? None? We'll now open it to the public. Is there anyone that would like to comment? Seeing none, any final comments from the petitioner? Okay.
I'll move approval of UV/V-30-17 use variance and variance from architectural standards based on the findings and conclusions in the staff report and with the 3 conditions of approval set forth in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any comments? Carmen?
Yes.
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 Motion passes, petition is granted. Thank you. And when staff is ready, we will hear V-32-17. I didn't mean to wake you. Actually, there were about 15 of us beforehand. Couldn't get in.
Sorry for the delay. Checking on our door situation, but it's still not resolved. Were you ready to keep moving
Yes,
forward? Sorry. The next case on the agenda is V-3217. This comes to us from Jeff Meyer and Culver's Restaurants. The property is located on the west side of the city along West 3rd Street. The property is a little more than 2 acres, is about 2.3 acres, and it's zoned commercial arterial. Immediately to the west is the Master Rental Tool and Party Supply rental location. It's just immediately northeast of the intersection of Corey and 3rd Streets. Coming north off that intersection, that signalized intersection is a private drive that serves both Master Rental and this property to the east. Again, 2.3 acres, zoned commercial arterial. It's listed as a community activity center in the growth policies plan. So the anticipation being large-scale commercial and mixed-use projects that would serve the wider community. Property is currently undeveloped. It does include a section of wooded area and some disturbed grassed areas, and then some artificial slopes coming down to the streets that were a result of the West 3rd widening project several years ago. Immediately to the north of the railroad tracks, on the other side of the railroad tracks is Valhalla Cemetery. There's an image looking north off of 3rd Street, so you can see that rise in the property. You can see the start of the wooded area, and then Master Rental is just to the left. This is looking in the opposite direction, so again, Master Rental on the left, but this is looking northeast. You can see the signalized intersection. You can see where the private drive connects in with the intersection. The petitioners are proposing to build a new restaurant. This would be a 5,500 square foot Culver's Restaurants. This would be a 1-story restaurant with a basement storage area. We've been working with them for quite a while now. The board may recall, was that hearing officer or was that BZA? About a year and a half ago, we worked with the petitioner at another location further to the west. That was reviewed by the hearing officer for a parking variance issue. For various reasons, that property did not end up working out, and they continued to look for land, and they've been looking at this section of land for quite some time. We worked with them over the last 8+ months to try to get this petition as close to code compliance as possible. But there are 3 elements of the project that do not meet the UDO requirements, and they're requesting variances from those 3 items tonight. The first is a variance to allow more parking than would normally be allowed, so it's a variance from the maximum parking requirements. The second is a variance from the parking setback and drive aisle setback requirements for parking and drive closer to the street than would normally be permitted. And the final variance deals with the tree preservation requirements and the tree canopy preservation percentages. So I'm just going to step through each of the individual variances, give you an idea of the size and scope of what we're dealing with here. So the first issue is the maximum parking variance. And for a restaurant of this type, the UDO has a maximum permitted parking count of 55 spaces. So as I'm sure you're aware, but for the public's interest, many cities regulate parking by minimums. Businesses must provide a minimum number of spaces, and then they can provide any more spaces than that, going on to the extent that the property can maintain. But Bloomington does parking a little differently. We have a maximum parking. The community would prefer that developers not build more than what they need on a typical basis. And the number in the code was 55 spaces. Now, since this ordinance was adopted with the UDO back in 2006, it's been understood that we may have gotten those numbers wrong. We may not have taken into account every particular business model, every particular type of use, and the board has seen several requests for maximum parking variances where the petitioner has looked at their existing locations or similar locations in the area and determined what are their true needs based on the size of the building, based on the number of employees, based on the realities of the area. In this case, the petitioner has 4 other locations that they've studied. The numbers are in your packet. And they found that a store of this size, they really need about 75 parking spaces. That takes into account their employees. It takes into account the fact there's no opportunities for spillover parking. There's no street parking on 3rd Street or on Corey. There's no opportunities at other nearby businesses where they might share parking. So the 75 spaces, they believe, and the department has determined that they're likely correct, is 75 spaces. So the first variance is a variance from the maximum allowed parking to permit 75 spaces instead of 55. That moves us to the parking setback and the drive aisle variance. The UDO requires that both drives and drive-throughs and parking spaces be set back from the front of the building along the street at least 20 feet beyond the front building wall of the structure. So the building is pulled forward as much as possible. The parking is wrapped around the back or the side to make the building the prominent feature on the property. Here in this case, the petitioner has attempted to do that as much as possible, but there's really 2 things limiting that in this situation. The presence of a large number of trees, a large wooded area on the property, and those trees are mostly in the back. So they've attempted to the maximum extent possible to preserve those trees, and that pushes all the development further to the south. If they were able to take down all those trees, they could move the parking back and not need a variance. But in this case, that's not possible. The trees are in the back, pushes all the development further to the south towards the streets. The second item is the access on 3rd Street. So the property is accessed from a shared drive coming off of 3rd, the lighted intersection, the signalized intersection of 3rd and Corey. And that drive is used by 2 different businesses. It's used by Master Rentals to the west. It'll be used by this business here to the east. And there's a very short distance between the drive-through that they've proposed, the layout of the lots, and where that signal is located. So based on that distance, you really can only have a couple cars stacked up at that light waiting to exit onto 3rd Street before you start blocking access to Master Rental, before you start blocking access to the rear of the property. And it creates a situation where they really need another opportunity, another way out for their drive-through, another way out for their customers. So they've designed a drive with no parking along it in front of the building that would bring cars back out to a secondary entry and exit onto 3rd Street on the east side of the property. But keep in mind that even that drive cannot serve traffic heading into the city, headed eastbound, because of the median in 3rd Street. So anyone heading west would have to use that shared drive, would have to use that signal, and would still, would even greater exacerbate the problem with the stacking distance. So that is the second variance, a variance from the parking setback requirements to allow for the about 6 spaces in front of the building setback, but not in front of the building, and a drive heading east and west between the building and the street. Then the third variance deals with tree preservation. So this property, this 2.3 acres, contains about 0.9, no, excuse me, it's a total number of, let me get that number here. Excuse me, so the property is 2.3 acres, and about 1.1 acres of that, just a little less than 50% of the property is covered with a tree canopy. Based on the UDO requirements, they're required to preserve, I believe it is 70% of that. And once you take into account the setback requirements and the preservation itself, that means preservation of about 0.9 acres. So 0.9 acres out of this 2.3 acres would be required to be retained. The petitioners are proposing to retain about a little less than half of that, 0.41 acres. And as you can see from this drawing, the shape of the tree canopy, the shape of the wooded area is very unusual. It's not all situated to one side. It's not all situated to the back. It's a little bit of both. It creates a very strange shaped piece of land for development. So they're proposing a little less than half of the required tree preservation. Now, they have put together a mitigation plan. This is something that the board hasn't seen, and frankly, the department hasn't seen since the UDO was adopted. But they're proposing to, instead of preserving all the required acreage, they're proposing to replace trees. They found that there are 22 native trees in the area to be disturbed. There are more trees than that, but some of those trees are non-native or invasive trees. There's 22 native trees, and their proposal would be to retain 0.41 acres and to replace all of the native trees that they're taking down. They'd replace them with new native trees. The trees would be 4 inches in caliper. These are large trees. This would allow them opportunity to grow and thrive and to recreate that canopy quicker than smaller trees would. The wooded area itself is a mix. Again, it's a kind of a fragmented piece of woods. There's a lot of invasive species around the edges, a lot of edge habitats, a lot of invasive species, a lot of undergrowth, and then also areas where human interaction has really trampled that undergrowth. So it's strange. There's areas where it's very overgrown and areas where there's no understory whatsoever. But that is the proposal for tree preservation. So in summary, this is a permitted use. We're not dealing with use variance. It's a permitted restaurant use here on this property. They have shown a need for more than the 55 parking spaces. That would normally be the maximum. They've demonstrated the need. There's no opportunities for street parking or shared parking. And those parking needs necessitate that parking being a little closer to the streets so as to maximize the tree preservation to the back. And the shallow stacking distance of the lights necessitates additional opportunities to be found for cars exiting the property, especially with the median, all leading into the parking setback variance. And finally, the difficult shape of the layout of the trees as well as the parking needs and the proposed mitigation plan. The department believes altogether allows this petition to meet the criteria necessary for these 3 variances. And with that, we do recommend that you adopt the proposed findings in the report and approve the variances with the 6 conditions as laid out in the report. There's 5 laid out in the report, and then we're proposing a third condition. This represents the commitment that was made for native species for the preserved trees, for the mitigation trees, replacement trees, that didn't quite make the packet or the petitioner's statement. And with that being said, there was a document that we failed to include in the packets. That was an assessment of the number and type of trees that was conducted by the city's urban forester, Lee Huss. We've provided that for you at your table, and I have copies here if anyone from the public would like to see it also. So with that, the department recommends approval. We're happy to answer any questions after the petitioner has had an opportunity to speak.
Okay. Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please state your name.
Jeff Fanyo.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 20 minutes, please.
Thank you. Jim's right. We've been working several months with the planning department trying to come to with a plan that is satisfactory and acceptable. We've done several things of reducing the parking. We originally had 83 parking spaces. We did reduce it down to 75. We added more circular drive lanes. We were able to take those out and reduce the amount of impervious surface area. So we are under the 60%. Now we're at 57.7%. And that helped on providing tree preservation along our east property line. Jim has covered the parking studies that we've done that demonstrate the need for the spaces that we're asking for. And Jeff Myers, by the way, is here along with John Leskowski and Neil Miller of Culver's. And he owns the stores up in Indians where the studies were done. And they clearly demonstrate at least 60 spaces on site, 60 up to 70. And then he has the opportunity where he's at, where he's leased spaces from Ivy Tech, from Menards, from other people that are own property there that have large parking lots. So he has spillover parking, which we don't have that opportunity here with 3rd Street being a no parking street. The drive aisle, that really improves the maneuvering of vehicles into and out of this without congesting that intersection. It gives people an opportunity to go in a different direction. If there is stacking at the intersection at the signal, they can go to the east entrance, exit onto westbound 3rd Street. Right now, there's U-turns that occur if you're westbound on 3rd and you're trying to get to Lee Supply. You have to make a U-turn at this location to come back to the east and get into Lee Supply. So that's the way the city has set West 3rd Street up and giving access when there's that median that's keeping left turns from occurring at uncontrolled spaces. Regarding the canopy tree, we have a really difficult site. Could you call up that PDF that I had? As he mentioned, the requirement here would be to preserve 0.9 acres of the site as for canopy. And this image here shows the existing drip line in the solid white area. And you'll see a cross-hatching up there at the north end of the site. That area there would be the only trees that would be allowed to come out if we were meeting that 0.9 acre requirement. That means that the entire lot that's to the east of this location would not be developable, and we would be able to remove a little bit of that area there to the north end of the site, and that's it. It's such an unusual site from this standpoint that there's so little area that we can pull trees out and still be in compliance. And then what I'd like to show next is the series of photographs that we've taken of this property, of the wooded areas. Here you can see that there's a lot of vines that are growing up in these trees, and if you look in here, and let's maybe go to the next slide, you'll see a lot of broken limbs and branches that probably have been either broken by storms or the weight of these vines. Maybe just go through the next one, please. And here you see the vinage crawling up through this and then infesting these trees. And there you'll see some breakage there in the center, top part of the photograph. And there again, we'll see where the trees have been broken down because of the weight of the vines. It's not a healthy area of woods. What we're wanting to do is go in and clean up the invasive species, clean up the vines, try to preserve the trees that we can, and then mitigate the removal of the trees that we can't with new healthy native species trees, large diameter 4-inch calipers that will have an immediate impact on the tree cover in that area. We're also planting these the proposed 22 trees in areas that are adjacent to the existing canopies to expand what the canopy that's there, in addition to meeting the landscape requirements throughout the site. Anyway, we're thankful that the planning staff has been able to work with us and come up with a positive recommendation for approval, and we hope that you feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff and petitioner? Joe?
For staff, so if we were to provide variance from the tree cover with the mitigation plan, how is that policed? Is that something that you have scheduled that you go back and check at certain points or after construction to make sure that what was promised to be put in is put in? How does that work?
Sure, absolutely. So it would need the required trees, the new 22 new 4-inch native trees would have to be shown on their plans, their construction plans. Before the building would be open to the public, we'd ensure that they're there, and they would need their required element of their landscaping plan, so they would need to stay in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, one question for staff. So if you look at the overhead photo, could you pull that up? No, just the lot photo, the one that's right after the staff report. There you go. So there's this site, so the drive that is shown, that is actually shown here as being on the petitioner's site, you're saying is actually a shared drive with Master Rentals?
Yeah,
in Old
that
West?
red line is just to highlight the property. The green line is...
The green line, okay.
It's a closer approximation of the property line. That drive splits.
More or less straddles. And that's
Yes.
a two-way drive and will
Yes.
continue to be a two-way drive. Where, can you show me on this? My question for staff is the entry point, or I guess it's the exit point from, because Culver's is going to have a back, if you're coming up that drive, the first drive you're going to pass is an out only, is that correct? And then you go in at the second turn on the right.
When you're coming from east to the west?
No, just coming off of 3rd Street from either direction. But on that shared drive, if I read the map correctly, it looks like the first drive cut to that shared drive.
I think
is that an
the
in only?
intention. The intention is it's mostly to be exiting for the drive-through, but it
Right.
is wide enough to allow for
Okay.
for two.
Then I will ask petitioner to clarify. Is that first entrance going to be a two-way or one-way, Jeff?
It's one way, exit only.
Exit only, okay. Now back to staff. So I just want to know where that exit is vis-à-vis the drop-off, the beginning of the drop-off on the master rental side of that drive. You know, there's a kind of a drop-off with a kind of a railing on the master rental site.
The petitioner may be able to
Okay,
answer
I'll ask
that.
petitioner.
The-
Is that exit point south of the beginning of that drop, right about where that vehicle is parked there on the left?
That's correct, it is.
It's still south of it,
It's-
so.
yeah.
So when people are exiting, they're not actually, there's no chance of them going into that railing. They're going to be south of that point
That's
already.
correct. Our access point's about 60-some feet from the on the edge of pavement on Third Street. And I'm not exactly sure where that retaining wall is, but it's just beyond that, I believe.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll just finish up my question for staff and just ask, is there any reason to care about having some kind of reflector or something? It's kind of an unusual situation where people are going to be coming out. I'd just like you to take a look at that and make sure that it's not so close that it might benefit from having some kind of a sign or reflector to indicate to people, you know, don't go that way because there's actually going to be a railing and a drop-off there.
Yeah, we can look into that, and
It may not be necessary because of what Jeff said about where the drive lines up with that railing.
Yeah, and it may be as simple as ensuring there's good lighting.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Barry?
Yes. For petitioner, so the number of trees that the mitigation plan is proposing that would be planted, the 22, that number has been arrived at after the inventory of the area that is going to be removed. Those are the non-invasive native species.
Yes, my survey section did a tree survey of the entire area.
Okay.
And they located all trees that are over 6 inches in diameter at chest height. And those are what we've labeled on the plans. And we classified what kind of trees they were. And the 22 were native species that show up in your landscape ordinance, and those are the ones that we're replacing.
Okay. So the Environmental Commission report expresses a concern that I wanted to hear your thoughts on, that the remaining, after the site is developed, that there isn't enough space to plant these 22 specimen trees. They're citing 14 feet apart to allow for them to thrive and to grow. Could you address that?
We believe that while it's, they may not be able to go to their full growth spans because they'll be close, but they will be able to mature and survive. We've checked that out with Jeff's landscape architect. A lot of times when we mitigate, and I've done quite a bit of mitigation work for Corps of Engineers type of projects, we will do off-site mitigation. And if we had that opportunity, we would do that as well. But we can do it on-site, and we can enhance what's there on-site with the plantings we have. And we could have a mature forested area in a very short period of time.
Okay. Is it possible so the area that's going to be preserved in the back, that's going to be cleaned up and maintained, I imagine, is it possible to plant any of the trees in that area to further
Yes, we could do that.
strengthen that?
We can do that.
Okay. And then a lot of this, the Environmental Commission report is concerned with just the contiguous nature of a stand of trees and the life that it supports. And so I guess my concern is, I can't comment at this point, but is there a plan so there's a plan for removing the invasive species, and will there be a maintenance plan in place to make sure that they don't return?
Yes, there is. And in fact, we discussed that today. Excuse me. Most of these projects we have to do a facility maintenance plan to cover maintenance of all aspects of the site design. And in this case, it would include the mitigation plan and the preservation of the existing trees that we have. And when we take out the invasive species, we will have room more room for these trees. I approach this as leaving even the invasive, some of the ash trees or something like maybe the silver maples, leaving those intact. But it might be a better plan to take those out and put more trees in there.
Okay, okay.
But certainly cleaning out all those vines that I showed you and the broken limbs and the things that are negative for this wooded area will give us more opportunity to plant trees.
To plant trees. So would your your petitioner be open to replanting, there's reference to 3 woodland stories. When we're talking about specimen trees, but the stand and a healthy stand of trees obviously has different levels of trees. So would they be open to the mitigation plan also involving the replanting of the 3 woodland stories with native plants?
Not that I'm not sure what that all means, but I believe that would be an appropriate thing to do here.
But you would be open to
Yes.
something of that
Yes.
sort? Okay. So, thank you. I have a question for staff. We've heard a number of different petitions in the past where we have, based on need that has been exhibited through parking studies, raised the allowance of the number of parking. Percentage-wise, can you give us a sense of where we've been on those? I mean, are we looking at, is it often that we're going almost 50% higher than the allotted number? Because that seems to be pretty way off from what,
You know, I don't have
What's
those
stated?
numbers in front of me. The board has seen a handful of parking variances, and it's, for the restaurants, it's been a mixed bag. I remember a situation where we were dealing with it was like a 300 square foot barbecue restaurant with a 2-space maximum. And that wouldn't even cover all their employees. So they were approved for 6 or 8 spaces. And I also recall the Cheddar's restaurant on Franklin Drive. And I believe, if I remember right, they were looking at double the maximum or close to double. And the board approved something closer to 40 or 50% above. I don't have those exact numbers.
Okay.
I'd say that's, 20 spaces over 55, so it's somewhere in the neighborhood of a 40%
40%.
increase. It's not outside of the realm of past approvals, and we believe that's, they've demonstrated a need.
okay.
I could add another one to that. I think it was in October, I was here for Burger King on the east side. They were allowed 14, and you approved them at 31, which more than doubles the parking they had.
Okay.
Any other questions?
One more. So for the petitioner, did you all consider a smaller restaurant on this site? Because the ones up in Indianapolis that were cited were in the 4,000 square foot range, and this one is
Yeah.
larger?
They did look at different size restaurants, and what the difference between Indianapolis and some of the other cities that they're located in, and Bloomington is, in Indianapolis, you have several Culvers within driving distance of each other, and Bloomington's going to have one. So while you have you need a bigger store here because there's not another one on the other side of town to go to, or one on the south side, or where on that. So that's why they're looking at this size store. It is one of the larger ones, but it's going to be the only one. And as a result, they felt like that to justify the cost of, and you don't get into that, but to justify the feasibility, financial feasibility of the project, they needed a store that they could make it work out.
Okay. Thank you.
Question for staff. Who owns this property?
There's 2 owners. The western property is owned by, say that again? The owners of Melody Music. I'm sorry, I don't have their names in front of me. And the eastern, the smaller property, which is about an acre, is currently owned by the city of Bloomington.
What is the distance from the master rental to 3rd Street, the front?
I'd have to estimate, but my guess is probably somewhere in the neighborhood about 20 to 25 feet.
And what is the Spencer Psychology Building? What would be the distance?
That's further to the east, right?
Yeah, it's the adjacent one.
We'll get that for you. give us just a moment. I'll try to pull up an image too that, where we can see a little bit more of the streets in context, looking at the other properties.
And where this project is proposed.
Right.
Distance then from the street too, please.
Gives it the edge of pavement. All right, so here we can see the streets. The property we're dealing with right now is this piece of land here. This master rental building is I'll give you a measurement from the building to, let's say, the sidewalk. That's in the neighborhood about 25 feet. And then the other building you asked about, again, from the building to the sidewalk, is in the neighborhood of about 43 feet.
And then this Culver's will be,
Jeff, do you have a measurement on that?
I'm estimating this off of the drawing I have here. It looks like it's going to be about 75 feet, maybe 80 feet.
okay, thank you. And then additional question for staff. We see there's a dead-end drive there. That gets removed, I assume?
Yes.
And then the new proposed street cut will be how far away from the light?
It is very similar in location to that existing drive. Jeff, do you have a measurement from the,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I don't have a scalable plan. What's the distance from the signalized intersection to the new eastern drive cut?
Oh, it's somewhere around 200-plus feet. I don't have that exact dimension, unfortunately, but
Could it be 166, Jeff?
it could be. I'm looking at this decel lane that turns south. Looks like it's about 80 feet, and then there's a taper that's probably 100 feet or so, so 180, somewhere in that range.
About 175 to 180 feet.
Yeah.
Do we have any adjacent properties with similar massing in terms of parking?
Similar massing in terms of
Yeah,
parking?
in terms of amounts of parking.
Amounts of parking?
Amount,
The American Legion Post has quite a bit of parking. Of course, it's a different building, just to the northeast. There are other large parking lots, Advanced Auto Parts here to the southwest, very large parking, of course, built prior to current codes. And there's considerable amount of asphalt storage area around master rental, but it's not necessarily all parking.
I think that's it for now. Any additional questions?
I have an initial question.
Yes.
Just for staff, the clarification, so what was just placed on our, on the desk, that's from Lee Huss,
Correct.
and he said that he counted 56 trees that are impacted by the proposed development that are non-invasives? Is that,
He's here. I'd rather.
Is he here?
I'd rather he answer that question.
okay.
Lee, can you state your name, please?
Sure, Lee Huss, Urban Forester, City of Bloomington.
Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
Please keep your answer just to the direct question.
sure.
Thank you.
I gave a pretty well detailed list of 56 different trees ranging from 13 walnut trees down to one hackberry, all different type of species. These are basically following, like Jeff said, 5 inches DBH and above.
Okay, so just so I understand, so the plan that's being proposed is that they would replant or plant 22 new trees, and we would be losing the 56 trees?
I don't think necessarily we're losing 56 trees. These are just trees in both parcels
Okay.
that I inventoried.
Okay, this is including the area that will be preserved?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
In your professional opinion, since we haven't seen a proposed mitigation plan like this, planting new trees, do you think that there's sufficient space and a way to do that that will be meaningful?
Yeah, I do. I think for the most part, a lot of these trees, if you even look at the DBH breakdowns that I did, it's relatively a young forest. I estimate this area was cleared probably in the 50s or 60s and has just been allowed to grow back naturally. So you have this high canopy level, and then you have this low area of really just the brush honeysuckle, in the Asian brush honeysuckle, the invasives that have moved in below it. A lot of times, I tell people in forestry, sunlight drives everything. So by opening up, getting rid of some of the invasives, it would open up and allow sunlight in for the additional plantings that are being proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? Seeing none, any final comments from the petitioner? I'm sorry. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Back to the board for action.
I will move approval of V-32-17 based on the findings and conclusions in the staff report, with the 5 conditions of approval set in the staff report, plus the 6th condition of approval that the staff presented here tonight, which is that replacement trees shall be native species.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Comments?
Would you entertain a friendly amendment of an additional,
I guess it depends on what it is, but
okay, additional.
She
sounds
condition.
friendly, though.
I'm very
Yes.
friendly.
friendly tone.
That the mitigation plan will include, and I don't know how to define this, I'm trying to get at another aspect of the work, which would be aimed at the 3 woodland stories with native plants and trying to help along that healthy growth at the different levels of the.
Well, why don't we just say that the landscape mitigation plan will seek to address all three
Woodland
stages.
stories, yeah.
Right. All 3 stages of woodland growth. Will that work?
I think so.
I will accept that as a friendly amendment. Would you?
A second?
All right.
Does staff have that?
I'll state it again.
Thank you.
So the motion is now for the 5 conditions of approval set forth in the staff report. 6th condition of approval, that replacement trees shall be native species. And 7th condition, the landscape mitigation plan will seek to address all 3 stages of woodland growth. Did I get that right?
That sounds good.
Any
Okay.
other comments?
No, I think this is a balancing act, and it's a very complicated site with a lot of limitations.
I am,
Which is the
yeah.
peculiar condition, obviously.
I'm going to be voting no on this just because I think the parking and the mass size of the building are excessive for the area, and I'm uncomfortable with the setback from the street. So, any other comments?
Yeah. I think that this is a bit of a tough one because I do wonder about the right fit of the use for the site. A lot of your stores in Indy, there are shared parking arrangements available, and I think this is exactly the kind of use that the UDO and the city likes to see, those types of opportunities. And sort of this is a standalone site placed on this lot, I think creates a lot of stress, and we're having to really look at some significant variances in order to allow this to happen. So I'm thinking about my vote a little bit, and it's not an easy, straightforward one for me.
If it were zoned differently, and if we were asking to do something like a PUD or change the zoning, I would be with you 100% that this isn't a place where that would be
Ideal kind of
appropriate.
setting.
But with a CA zone already on the site,
Yeah.
it seems to me this is a reasonable way of accommodating the fact that the zoning exists on the site. But I do think it's a balancing act.
At this point,
Procedural, it's procedural.
Procedural
about-
question would be
about the
fine.
outcome of the vote. Just a question about the outcome of the vote. What if the outcome of the vote is a tie? What does that mean?
Sure, if the outcome of the vote was a tie, then there'd be no action, and the petition would be forwarded to the next BZA meeting, and hopefully at that point, we would have 5 members where we could have a vote where there would not be a tie.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Carmen? No.
No.
Yes?
Yes.
I apologize that there is a tie. So this will be carried forward to the next meeting. Thank you. Next case, when staff is ready, B-33-17, let the record reflect, please, that Barry Clapper will be recusing herself and Jenny Southern will be sitting in. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, yeah.
Good evening. The next petition tonight is V3317. It's a petition located at 1326 East Maxwell Lane. The property is developed with a single-family house, zoned residential single-family, and the growth policies plan designates this area as urban residential. The request before you tonight is to allow polycarbonate on a portion of a new carport that is being built on the house. So you can see here in the circled area, there is the end of a driveway, and then also a pedestrian entrance into the house. And the petitioners have a building permit to build a carport at this location. And what they are requesting is to be able to use polycarbonate plastic on part of the roof of the carport above the pedestrian entrance. So the UDO designates certain materials that are allowable in the single-family zoning districts. The materials chosen, you can see listed here on the screen, are intended to be functional, durable, provide consistency in the neighborhoods, and be aesthetically pleasing material options. The polycarbonate plastic is not an approved material, and that's why they need to request the variance. The location of the material in this particular request would not be visible from the road. It would be laid flat. At this location here, this is an aerial of the proposed carport. And as you can see again in this image, the eastern side of the carport has a sloped roof here, and the oh, I'm sorry, the western side of the carport has a sloped roof here, and the eastern side has a flat roof. This would be where the polycarbonate would be used, and it would be used only in the rear portion over the door. Staff finds, and then there's information here submitted by the petitioner about the potential material that would be used. Staff finds that while there are no adverse impacts on the welfare of the community or surrounding uses by allowing a small non-visible area to use an alternative material, no physical characteristics of the property are found to be peculiar to address the third finding of fact from similar properties, and no practical difficulties are found on this typical lot development site. And so the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and deny V3317. I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please state your name.
Cynthia Brubaker.
Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I affirm that I will.
You have up to 20 minutes.
Okay. I am Cynthia Brubaker with Spring Point Architects, and I want to thank Jackie Wright for her presentation. The clients, Ed and Wendy Bernstein, came to our office to design a covered parking area for their home in this neighborhood. They are retired and wish to age in place in this home. It is considered a mid-century modern house. They park their cars outside the house, as you can see. There is a garage that's part of the house underneath, but they also wanted to have covered parking for when they don't pull the car in the house and for a second vehicle. There is a large walnut tree you can see to the right in this photograph that was important for them to maintain, but also to protect the cars from debris that falls from the tree. It was somewhat of a task in trying to decide exactly how to locate this carport. And I do have one more document for the document camera, please. And so I submit for you several items to consider that we did in placing this carport that led up to the situation that you have before you. First of all, we have the garage, and it was important to place the carport in front of the garage. Secondly, we have the curb cut, and it was important to use the existing curb cut. Third, we have that existing mature walnut tree, which it was important to maintain. The client asked us to do that. Then we have the setback, and we know that we must be 15 feet setback, but we can use overhang, which we have the 15-foot setback plus a 3-foot overhang. We also have a culvert between next to the roadway, which gives an extra bit of space and pushes the property line closer to the house, if you will, and requires, with that setback, that we have the carport right up against the house. You could also consider that being a corner property, there are other places one could put the carport, but again, it makes the most sense where the curb cut is, where the garage is, et cetera. So given all these conditions, we then are looking at the garage area and the main entryway, which is a doorway with a side light, and it was designed to allow natural light into that entryway. And with the carport being squeezed to the right a little bit in the image you're looking at because of the tree, et cetera, and wanting to have a covered area for getting out of the car and walking into the house, we're now creating a situation where we're going to take away that light that was intended to come through the door and the entryway in the way the house was designed. We're also on the north side of the property, which further takes away from the amount of natural light that can come into the space. Additionally, I would add that the proposed material, although it's a plastic, it is a material that's been developed over time to be more durable. And that's one of the things that was designated in the report as important, that the material be durable and traditional. As Jackie said, we can't see the material from the road. The design of the carport is in the tradition of the house, that mid-century modern, and in a way that you can't see it. And that plastic material, again, is hidden behind that front design of that carport, and is compatible with the architecture of the building. So the peculiar situation of the way this house is sited, the garage is sited, the carport, the tree, and all of that, gives us this location where it makes the most sense to site the carport, and then we have the issue of the entryway and the importance of allowing that natural light to the entryway, which made the most sense to have this area of the more transparent way of allowing light to pass through the carport.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for staff and/or petitioner by the board? Please. Joe?
Yes, are you going to be able to walk on that to, I mean, it seems to me that part of the problem with polycarbonate is you're going to have to be able to get up there and clean all your walnuts off and your walnut leaves and stuff. So is that a strong enough structural material to walk on? Or,
Well, it's not a very large area,
okay,
and it would be possible to remove anything by being, for example, on a ladder at the edge of that area.
okay. Is it, can I ask, I'm assuming it's the polycarbonateness of itself that is bothering the staff, that it's not on a approved list of materials. If this were, I don't know, a skylight, glass or something like that, would that be okay? It's just that it's poly?
A skylight would be allowed, yes.
Okay, so they could put a glass roof up there and they'd be okay.
Yeah, I think if it was in a window frame and we could call it a skylight, yes, I think we could do that.
I would think that that would be too fragile for under a walnut tree. They've actually cracked windshields on my car. I also have a very large walnut tree, which my car shows. So I'm not sure if the polycarbonate is actually stronger than, or possibly safer and more durable than what would be normally allowed in this location because of that walnut. Do we have any strength as compared to glass specifications for that particular
I don't know
material?
how it would compare to glass per se, but as I said, this material has been developed to be a more durable material and to handle things like that, surely.
Okay.
So I don't think it would be a concern as far as being able to handle the things that would fall on it in this location.
Right. I don't know if anybody's ever had skylights taken out by walnuts. I know they can be heavily damaged by ice, hail, things like that. So I was just wondering structurally if it was comparatively something that actually wouldn't be a bad thing on a carport under a walnut. I had never heard of this before, that we had a list of approved materials. Has that ever come up that you guys have ever noticed?
I think that's a great question for staff.
I've never seen that. How did this come up?
So there's been a list of approved materials for single-family homes going back at least till 1995, possibly till up to 73. And they exist to provide homeowners and home builders options of proven materials, traditional materials, that are acceptable. There's a list of permitted siding materials, there's a list of permitted roofing materials, and the roofing materials is a very short list. It's shingles, shakes, tiles, standing seam metal, or V-grain metal roofs, and that's it. It's not a comprehensive list. There may be situations in the future where we may want to consider widening that list as we look to update the UDO, but that's the list we have to work with today. This material, it's been a long time since the code is written, so I can't recall if there was any specific discussion about this material. But in general, the thought was that it was not, at the time, when the UDO was written, not a durable material and not a formal enough material, if that makes any sense. There are other options. Skylights are one option, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, I've just seen whole carports made of polycarbonate. You know, they're kind of translucent. I've seen them around in neighborhoods before, and is it because they're not attached to a house that those are okay, or are those not okay and people are just putting them up?
It's likely it predates the standards.
Okay. All right.
So, just one question for petitioner. Did you consider putting a more traditional skylight, which would be legal?
I think the issue with the skylight, and the client may want to say something about that, is that you have a whole different construction type. You have a heavier, you have to build a frame that holds that window, and that's not what is in this structure. This is...
Or a solar tube, or any of the other things that would all be legal in this location?
It's the most efficient way to deal with this small area. And if I may, as
By efficient, I'm sorry, but by, what do you mean by efficient?
well, in order to get that light through the space or through that surface in this amount of area, which is about, 6 feet by 4 feet?
Sir,
Yeah.
please. You're welcome to stand at the podium, but we cannot speak from the public.
And I would also add that in 1995, this material didn't exist in this form. Again, this is something that's been developed, that's 20-plus years ago, as a more widely used and accepted material for applications like this. And it's also, we have this mid-century modern house where we have materials like glass and plastic, resins, metals, enameled metals that are used that wouldn't have been considered in 95 because we're not thinking about this age of home. So it's, and again, the skylight, back to the skylight question, it's a roof. It would be a bulkier construction that would be a greater cost and a greater weight that require more structure to support that skylight.
Thank you.
Any
You're
more
welcome.
questions, Joe?
No.
Joe?
I want to understand a little bit more about how we've gotten here. So, looking at this plan, half of it's an existing carport?
No, there
Okay,
is not
This
currently.
is all new. This is all new.
Correct.
And the one on the right half that we're looking at has a sloped roof? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes,
So half of the carport has a sloped roof and the other half near the doorway is flat?
there's a flat section that goes all the way across, and then there's the sloped piece that goes over top.
Over the top of half of it?
Right,
Okay. So this is all new structure?
yes.
Okay, and currently, the doorway underneath this proposed
Yes.
polycarbonate is exposed. There's no cover.
Correct.
And so this is the first time, essentially, a porch overhang is being created.
Correct.
Okay. So this is in effect a porch overhang.
Yes,
Okay,
doubles as that.
okay. It doubles as a carport.
And a porch overhang.
And-
Those
I'm
two
sorry?
things. A carport and a porch overhang,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, okay. All right.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment? Sir, I'm sorry, you cannot comment in the public, period, but because you are the petitioner, but you are welcome. We have one more follow-up portion for the petitioner where you could comment.
Just hang on a minute.
Hang on, and I'll give you a chance to comment, but you can't do it in the public, period, because you are a petitioner. Thank you. Okay, there are none. So back to the petitioner, time is remaining. Would you or the petitioner like to comment now? You can go up there now. It would be our honor.
I believe there's about 14 minutes left.
Thank you, 14 minutes.
Hi.
Please state your name.
Ed Bernstein, I'm the owner.
Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I just have a quick thing. This is a very, very small, we're seniors, we're in our 70s, okay? We need a little bit, we would like to get a little bit of light. We've talked extensively about this material. I mean, we have a lot of walnut trees. I've been dealing with walnut trees for however long, since '92, since I lived in this house. And we asked this question, and from what we gather, it's not going to be a problem. So that's all. We really just want to get a little bit of light in there. And it, as this gentleman said, it's 20 years since this material. Things move on. Material gets better, it gets stronger. So thanks.
Thank you. Back to the board.
Yeah. I am going to move for denial of V-33-17 because I just can't get there from here. It's a nice design. I have nothing against the design. I think the code maybe needs to be reconsidered on this basis, but that's not legally what we're allowed to grant a variance for. The peculiar conditions of the tree and the culvert are all reasons why the carport has to be where it is. That's clear. But there is a legal way to get light to the door, and the peculiar condition has to justify the deviation from what is legally permitted. So my hope is that this is something where the staff can take a look at this and try to bring some kind of change to the ordinance if that seems appropriate, given the way this material apparently has evolved over time. But I just can't, I can't see how this fits the legal definition of a peculiar condition that justifies the request to deviate from what is already legally permitted. That seems to be mostly about the cost, and that's not one of the things we're allowed to consider. So I just can't get from A to B.
Well said.
Additional comment is that this request is being generated out of a want rather than a need. There's a garage on the building. They currently do have light because there's nothing blocking it through the doorway. So the desire to build this and having a need to ask for variance to a code is the complicating issue for me. Whether you choose to use your garage as a garage or for storage or whatever, that's irrelevant as to the building was built. There is a garage, the front door gets light, you're wanting to cover it up, and there is a code, and it's difficult for me to go against that code just because it's a desire rather than a building need.
I would still entertain a motion.
I move denial of the
Move
petition.
denial, and second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'm sorry, I should have said on the ground that there's no peculiar, practical difficulty based on a peculiar condition of the property.
Thank you. Carmen? And just to remind the board that if you vote yes, that is for denial.
Yes.
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 And V-33-17 is denied. I'm going to keep you all here for just one more minute. I have been serving on the BZA since Mayor Fernandez asked me to. And every time that my appointment came up, I would get a very nice letter from Mayor Fernandez or Mayor Cruzan thanking me for my service and congratulating me on my next appointment. I did not receive one this time. So I wanted to thank Mayor Fernandez and Mayor Cruzan for the opportunity. I've been very fortunate to work with Tom Makuta and Christine Langley, who are excellent and are missed. The staff here tonight, Eric is not here as well. We've been through too many fence cases to count, among other things, and you've been just nothing but a pleasure to work with. And the board has been one of the best we've had, so I will miss it greatly. I will hold the record going forward for the fastest meeting. I challenge you all to beat that. So it's been a great experience, and I thank you all so much. And now we are adjourned.